Back in winter 2022, it's now May 2023, I shot a video on how to make your chainsaw chain and bar last a long time. Then I said the chain was getting towards the end of its life, and basically this is how to tell your chain has reached the end of its life. Note, this is still sharp, it's still cutting efficiently. But you can see on this one, hopefully, that you've got a line just here, just in behind the edge. That's your wear limit. That also gives you guidance to the angle that you're supposed to sharpen at, and you can also see one on here and on this one. These ones on this side have all reached the line. So this chain, even though it's still sharp, still cutting well. Just did that, some preparation for some coppice crafts. That is ash. Cut along the grain. This chain a couple of days ago. But although you could still keep sharpening it, that would be inadvisable, because if you get your teeth too small, they start spitting off at you. Like this one here has gone a lot further than the others. So this chain, even though it's lasted a long time, it's done a lot of cutting since we last shot it. A lot of firewood and a lot of felling up in the coppice to fell my firewood. And it's been sharpened 6-7 times. Each time it's just been given a tickle. I've not managed to hit anything with it at all, so it's taken no severe damage. But this is the end of the line for this particular chain. Let's turn him round, look at the other side, and you can hopefully see that your gullets are okay. Teeth don't lean backwards, they're not undercut, and it's just starting to touch the drive links, but it hasn't dug into the drive links, because as it got over half worn, I changed from a 3/16 file to a 5/32, so they go down a file size. Right, hope that's useful and interesting. And the guide bar is getting towards the end of its life. It may be take another chain, especially if I can find a chain that's half worn. Thank you very much. Right, worn out chain we just saw was a 5/32 chisel chain. This is a semi-chisel or semi-chipper, and this one is about 3/4 worn. But if you look at it, it's sharp. The angles on this side are different from the angles on the side towards us. So you could correct this and still use it a little bit longer. But note, there are no wear limits on this chain, so you need to know when to stop. Right, this chain here is a section I cut out of a long chain, and the reason I cut it out was because it's taken damage. It's jumped the bar rails and it's hit something hard, and it's taken off the bottom of some of the drive links. This is the face that the sprocket drives on. This face here keeps the bar clean, and you can see a little bit of damage here too. So this one you couldn't use again. The rest of this chain, it was a long chain. It was I think it was an 80 something drive link. I cut down to a 60 drive link for a 16-inch bar. This is a 3/8 chain, and it's a chisel. And if you look in the back, or if I put my hand in the back, you can see it's taken damage and all its little noses. So this is never going to be sharp, while that flat bit exists on the point. And again, you can see the max wear line, and you can see that the angle parallels the line of the max wear line. And if you look at it, you can see the gullets are about right. So this was sharp. Well, this is all correct, but not sharp, because you've got a lot of build-up of resin. This was used for cutting hardwoods. So this was used a bit blunt, and you've also got an issue with lack of lubrication. You see the wear in here. Basically, your chain does not stretch as it gets worn. It gets longer because each of these is basically a bearing. This moves on a pin which links these two tie plates together, and as it wears you get more and more play. If you add that up along the length of the chain, at some point it's going to get so worn it's going to start to deform the two sprockets at either end of the bar. This is just about acceptable. This one over here, if we look at this one, this is again about 3/4 worn. It's taken damage on here. This angle was correct, but it's hit something hard. By the time this is sharpened out, this will be nearly worn out. But if the chain was all like this, this would be worth resharpening and putting back on a chain, provided there's not too much wear in it. And you can see that the play is a lot less than that previous chain. But if you look here, you can see burrs on the bottom of all the tie straps. These run on the bar rails, and these burrs are caused by the chain doing that and brenneling on the top of the bar. And the reason it does that is because it's slack. If the chain is correctly tensioned, you will get less instances of that sort of damage happening. And we can see on this chain it's nearly worn out. This is a 532 again. All the burrs here are much smaller. This has always been run correctly tensioned. Turning around, look at the other side, you can see the same thing. So as well as looking at the amount of wear on the cutters, when you're assessing a chain for wear, whether it would be safe to put them back on the saw, you look for this. You look for damage on the drive links, and you look for burring on the bottoms of all the tie straps. This isn't bad from that point of view. This has probably been run gritty. Right, hope that was useful, and I hope the GoPro picked it all up. And this chain on this old still, 034 AV Super, getting on for 30 years old. It usually starts first or second pull, and after it's been sitting for several months you stick some fresh fuel in it. So that's one of my backup saws. Anyway, this chain is about half worn. It's sharp. There's a bit of damage on this tooth here, and you can see that the depth gauges have had their first file. Do you see that? So this has got plenty of life left, as has the guide bar. So why would you want to mess about with knackered chains like this? I stress this is still sharp, this is still capable of cutting. Well, the reason is that if you're working for yourself, And unless you're doing very high value work up against stiff deadlines with time penalties, in which case you would have a couple of spare chains, and if you hit something or it got slightly dull, you change over at your next convenient break. Keeping a chain sharp doesn't take very long at all. And a chain like this, stick it in your toolbox, and if you're doing scrub clearance, which where I used to work, we used to do a lot. The scrub clearance used to be done by volunteers working with hand tools. They used to anthill mob it. This is on nature conservation sites in the UK. And then we'd come along with chainsaws and do the really gutty job, which was taking all the stalls down as low as possible so that people could then walk over the sites. And on some sites like Chalk Grassland or Heathland, we would then come along and we would treat the stumps so they didn't regrow. But if you're cutting as low as possible, even though the saw is in that attitude, then you tend to use the pusher chain on the top, because you can see the front of your stump. So that's your stump. You can see the front, you can't see the back. So use the pusher chain so it keeps the chain cleaner, doesn't drag stuff through the front from muck on the back of the stem you're cutting. Your chain always takes damage, and so does your guide bar. So an old chain, an old guide bar saves you money. And if you're working for a charity or for a public sector organisation doing nature conservation, you are always strapped for cash. And basically saving money where you can, where it's safe to do so, is a damn good idea. And if you're working for yourself, of course, the less money you spend on chains, bars, parts for the saw, the more money you have for you to do what you want with your life.